Help!
10 horror movies that will trigger your phobias. Number 10. Fire in the Sky. Alien abduction is a universal idea in modern culture, pretty much since Roswell in 1947. But for as many as 1 in 40, there's a fear or even the belief that you've been beamed aboard and subjected to experiments. Fire in the Sky takes that fear and shows us just how intense the event could be. From the violent, careless dragging and the cold table to the suffocating restraints and cruel mechanical implements. Okay, yeah, the aliens look a bit like angry walnuts, but that's not the point. You can see for yourself just how viscerally terrifying the details of the abduction are. The film website Bloody Disgusting even describes it as the scariest scene of its kind ever. In real-life terms, psychologists put alien abduction experiences down to sleep paralysis, where the mind wakes up out of sync with the body, which is still in sleep mode and can't move, effectively leaving a person trapped in their own body. That's understandably terrifying, so a lot of people associate it with something they've absorbed from culture that makes sense as a reason, usually alien abduction. Number 9. Cabin fever. Disease is one of the primal fears, and so it should be. Whether it's ancient risks of dying from a sniffle or modern-day anxieties of global outbreaks like SARS, Ebola or bird flu, cabin fever uses those anxieties to engineer some deadly effective horror. In the film, we see the classic horror trope of college kids hanging out in a cabin in the woods. You've seen it all before, from Evil Dead to the literal cabin in the woods. Over the course of the movie, we see the kids grappling with the dangerous spread of necrotizing fasciitis, a flesh-eating disease that usually comes from a bad case of strep. But what makes this film so deliriously fear-inducing is the sense of paranoia that comes from how the kids break apart trying to deal with a mindless, relentless and invisible predator. That's coupled with the real-life way we think about diseases. Psychologically, when we perceive deadly consequences of an outbreak, our risk assessment processes go out of the window. In other words, we worry more and act less rationally. And the statistical unlikelihood of actually being infected won't stop us worrying. Number 8. Brain Dead, Dead Alive. Back before Peter Jackson was racking up the Oscars sending hairy-footed halflings to their doom, or should I say Mount Doom, he found fame making the schlockiest of schlock horror. Brain Dead, better known as Dead Alive in the United States, is considered Jackson's best gore-fest and the bloodiest film of all time, literally. It's said to have used nearly 400 litres of fake blood in its production. The only film to come close to that is the Evil Dead remake. It's admittedly as comedic as it is scary, but there's a chance this scene might just trigger a case of hemophobia in you, if you're one of the 15% of people who faint at the sight of blood. It's thought to be an evolutionary trait developed as a response to threats, essentially working like playing dead, since if people are bleeding, there's probably some kind of danger lurking around. What better way to test that phobia than to see a lawnmower splatter 300 litres of the stuff across the room? Number 7. Jaws. Now, you might not even consider this one a horror film, a lot of people don't, but the phobia factor here is undeniable, it's bona fide history. Back before Jaws, sharks weren't really a big deal. There wasn't much study of them, and a lot of people just thought of them like most other sea creatures. In fact, most people thought around the turn of the 20th century that a shark had never killed a man. But then Jaws changed everything. The story of the vengeful predator terrorizing the island of Amity resonated with viewers and caused generations of moviegoers to associate ocean swims with vulnerability and danger in the amygdala, the fear center of the brain. Audiences took the tagline of "Don't go in the water" quite literally, when it was widely reported that beach attendance dropped dramatically in the summer of 1975. It all comes down to the portrayal of sharks as hateful, vengeful predators that remember and stalk their land-bound prey, which, by the way, is nonsense. Once that idea made its way into the zeitgeist, people began to avoid sharks and even hunt them on principle. Number 6. Pulse. It might as well be an unwritten rule that when a new piece of tech comes out, a filmmaker will work out how it might kill you, or possibly everyone. Whether it's The Lawnmower Man, Terminator, or even Unfriended, but 2001's Pulse is a bit different. It hits you where it hurts. Officially known as Kairo, the fairly obscure Japanese movie has been described as the gold standard of J-horror, depicting the story of malicious ghosts invading the real world through the internet. Instead of just being a spooky ghost story, the film focuses on the anxiety and existential dread that the internet brings to society, which the ghosts accomplish by trapping their victims in their own loneliness. While disputed, plenty of studies link use of real-world technology to social anxiety. One from 2015 even found a direct correlation. People who used social media more than 58 times per week were 3 times as likely to suffer feelings of isolation. As a good example of the effect, Cairo is filled with suicides brought on by the mysterious online Forbidden Room. It's pretty unsubtle social commentary about the internet, but critics consistently point out how unsettling the idea of the film is. Number 5. Psycho. Where would a video about fear be without the true king of the craft? Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho is beyond infamous for its masterful use of tension throughout, but none more than the shower scene. Probably one of the most iconic sequences to ever hit the big screen. It was even voted the most nail-biting movie moment ever, but given the ratcheting up of the threats and violence in slasher flicks over the years, you might not think the scene could cause a phobia in anyone, but it did just that. The film reportedly contributed to a downturn in showers after its release, and Hitchcock is said to have received letters explaining how fans would refuse to step behind the curtain. One even said his daughter refused to clean herself at all after being put off by the bathtub drowning in the film Les Diaboliques. So the master of suspense recommended he chucked her in the dry cleaners. Oh, Hitch. But most of all, its star Janet Leigh developed a case of the shower shakes after seeing herself brutally murdered in the final cut. To this day, she'll only bathe and panics a bit when her hotel room only has a shower. Number 4. The Blair Witch Project. The Blair Witch Project wasn't just a runaway success, earning around $10,000 for every dollar spent on its $22,000 budget. But the found footage classic changed the horror game in a way that few films ever have. To this day, even some of the most ardent horror fans and critics say it scared them more than any other film and really spoke to their fears of the unknown, the wilderness, trees, anything outdoors pretty much. In fact, some psychologists and philosophers consider the unknown to be the only fear that people don't need to learn as children. It's just there. The team behind the Blair Witch Project exploited that fear in an ingenious way and was one of the first examples of viral marketing to boot. They created a website filled with supposedly real evidence, not to mention a damn slick website, to convince people that the Blair Witch urban legend was real. That, combined with the pure, unfiltered tension that came pretty much just from freaky-looking woods and sticks, and not to mention snot, left moviegoers afraid to camp for years. Newspapers still use Blair Witch as shorthand for scary camping experiences to this day. Number 3. This night I'll possess your corpse. Spiders shouldn't really be that scary. They're mostly non-aggressive and they catch all the really annoying pests. But even so, they're ranked as the public's number 1 fear. A London City University study found that 75% of people tested were afraid of wall crawlers. And of all things, it was their legs that did the scaring. According to Professor Chris Buddle, it comes down to conditioning. Basically, society has taught us to fear spiders, particularly through family members enforcing the idea. If you're looking to tingle your spider sense on the silver screen, look no further than the obscure Brazilian horror This Night I'll Possess Your Corpse. It's part of the Coffin Joe saga. He's old-school Brazilian horror royalty, like the country's answer to Leatherface. In the film, Coffin Joe sets out to find a bride by abducting them and subjecting them to tests designed to invoke fear in them, like this skin-crawling portrayal of a cluster of spiders slowly making their way over a group of women. It's a tense, slow burn that's sure to give anyone with even an inkling of arachnophobia the creeps. And to top it off, it's 100% real. Number 2. Buried. Taking a break from superheroes, Ryan Reynolds stars in a film that you could describe as pure, unadulterated claustrophobia, or taphophobia to be precise, which is the fear of being buried alive. Reynolds plays a truck driver captured by insurgents in Iraq and literally buried alive in a wooden coffin with nothing but his phone, a lighter, and his quickly dwindling hope. That's it, that's the whole movie. In other words, neither the audience or the star ever leave the box for the duration of the film. I can't really think of a more direct way of triggering taphophobia, short of, actually shoving you in a box. It may have even given its star a case of it. Ryan Reynolds has described his difficulty in watching the film, after having spent days inside an actual box, burning his fingers on the lighter and actually swallowing sand in the process of filming. The crew even had to break him out on several occasions. Number 1. 100 Tears. Clowns are damn scary, they just are. And there's a pretty good chance you agree, since a 2016 poll showed 42% of people were at least a little afraid of them. That's 1% more than terrorism and 7% more than biological warfare. So when it comes to clown horror, you would think that it would be the obvious choice. The original miniseries has been credited with a whole generation of coulrophobia. That's fear of clowns. But that would be too easy. Instead, let's go with 100 Tears, a pretty obscure 2007 slasher flick about a clown who's falsely accused of sexual assault, so he decides to take vengeance on his accusers, and in the process gets a taste for carnage, becoming a full-blown serial killer legend. Psychologically speaking, the fear comes from the lack of identity we get from clown makeup, and the disconnect that comes from the permanent smile. According to Psychology Today, we're unnerved when we have happiness imposed on us. What's so scary with this film is that it dispenses with all the horror pretenses and shows you exactly what a killer clown is capable of. Aside from, just being creepy. And we think that's a lot worse than an otherworldly being who just bums around for 26 years at a time. Well, that was 10 horror movies that will trigger your phobias. What movie moment scares you the most? Let us know in the comments and make sure to like and subscribe. And while you're at it, check out this great all-time 10s video on screen now.